Hello, welcome to African in New York. African in New York welcomes Africans and African Americans of high achievements to come to the studio and to tell us their stories and how they have made it in New York City and in the United States in general. And today we are so happy that we have Yoliswa Cele. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Yoliswa is a founder and CEO of Ndosi Strategies, and also she is the executive director of Imbizo Host Committee, as well as she is the research associate for Harvard University for Undocumented Immigrants. So, you know, she has a broad CV, as you see. But before we start asking her some questions about what she does, I would like her to take a few minutes to introduce herself.
So my name is, I like the way you pronounce my name, by the way, but it's actually Yoliswa Cele.
Yeah, with a click.
Yeah, with a slight click. So yes, so I am South African, born in South Africa, spent most of my life here in New York, in the States. And so my passion and kind of what I do is around social entrepreneurship. And so most of the projects that I am currently leading or involved in are kind of centered around social impact. With Ndosi Strategies, it's a company I actually just launched very recently. I'm still in the process of fully launching. And that's centered around my peers that I've seen here in New York, around my community, who are ambitious, who are trying to take on new initiatives around being entrepreneurs, around small businesses. And with my education around marketing and international relations and kind of on the field work in marketing and development, I felt that it could be a tool for me to use to kind of partner and collaborate and give advices and consulting to my peers around how to better package their great ideas. So it's because I've seen some great ideas, and then sometimes they kind of fall short with the packaging aspect of it. And so for me, that's kind of what's been my motivation around Ndosi Strategies.
You are the executive director of another organization, and the name of the organization is Imbizo Host Committee that operates from New York City as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that organization as well?
Right. So Imbizo Host Committee is a immigrant community organization. And so at the current moment, we're a team of five of my colleagues. And it was started, brainchild, around 2013, early 2013. And basically it started as a forum. Because the idea is that as a South African community abroad, I've often run into people from other parts of the continent, and people would say, oh, I've never even met a South African, you're the first one I've met. And so they often felt like there wasn't really a bridge between the rest of the community here in New York and South Africans. And so the other colleagues that I have with me also kind of felt that same notion, and brought me on board for Imbizo. And Imbizo is centered around developing a united and thriving South African community here in New York.
See the nation through the people's eyes. See tears that flow like rivers from the skies.
of the U.S. Africa ambassador is just that, is that you are to bridge the gap between the diaspora and the continent. So you bridge the issues. So we're here, and the mission statement is to advocate for issues affecting African women and children in the diaspora and back in the continent. And so you are then to be the example of all things African, all things in terms of cultural pride, in terms of being empowered and empowering others, and things like this where you raise funds and you give back to those who are struggling, who are less fortunate, who are facing large adversities.
So we've done a number of initiatives around specifically providing South Africans here with resource information around immigration, around legal, job opportunities, scholarship information, and then also we've done a lot of Pan-African partnerships with other community organizations, like let's say you have different organizations. You have the Senegalese Association here. You have other organizations such as CYAL, which is Council of Young African Leaders. And so when those kinds of organizations do panels on the continent or events, we make sure that now there's a consistent South African presence. So you can follow us on Facebook as well as Mbizo HCNY and Mbizo Hosting Committee at gmail.com. We also have a blog spot, Mbizo HCNY.
So when President Zuma came to New York City and then he got involved with your activities at one point, how did he support your organization? I mean, did you feel like he was supporting South Africans in New York City?
Yes, we did, because I mean, it's quite a feat to get a head of state to engage in a community, like not a community event, but to be a community organization that doesn't have a big, sponsorship behind it, and to also host a president is a challenge. So we had to kind of show him our resume of what we've accomplished here in the States in regards to putting the community together and our agenda and our mission. And since our mission is, aligned with the mission of national development, it's just that we're abroad, he was very much interested and very much excited to engage with his constituency. And so we were really thrilled to see that. And he was for all the years he's come, he's always been very, give us his time, although he's here for the General Assembly, which means that he's a very packed schedule. He makes the time. I mean, last year he was about to actually leave and jump on the jet to go back to South Africa, but came and from our event went straight to the airport. But he engaged, answered questions, gave us his time. So I think that was very important. And that in itself is enough support for us, for you to actually give us your time, which can be a challenge sometimes for leaderships and the communities that they serve.
The reason why I brought this up is because I know that you also work as an associate researcher at Harvard University for undocumented immigrants.
Right. So it's actually, I'm on the research team, the New York research team for the Harvard Graduate School study on DACA.
Okay. So there are so many issues we can talk about when it comes to the undocumented immigrants.
Right.
And, can you just maybe introduce what you do so that we can, start asking questions from there?
So the study in itself is a national study. And the study is basically a study that's going to give a firsthand perspective on youth immigrants. As much as you see the conversation happening on the national stage in the U.S., there isn't really a personal perspective outside of just the numbers of these random numbers they kind of throw around. And so as someone who's a part of that research team and been doing the interviews, it's been very eye-opening for me, even as a young migrant myself, to hear the various stories and challenges that other young migrants have had to face, whether it was during their migration trips to the U.S. or during the times where they actually arrived, or during the times where they were separated from their mothers or their fathers while they were still back home and their parents were trying to facilitate bringing them over. So it's been a very eye-opening experience, and I think that this study is going to be, it's historical in its sense because there's never been a national study like this, of this nature, on this particular group of young migrants. And so I think that it's going to add facts to a lot of the debate. It's going to add a lot of perspective in regards to, you know, the daily life of a young migrant. And I mean, I think that people think, for whatever reason, that, you know, you get onto American airport and you're handed food parcels and America just starts signing you checks, which is far from the truth. As a migrant, you have to work twice as hard on all angles to basically prove yourself academically. If you have another language that you're learned and now you're trying to be an English speaker, you face those challenges. If you're undocumented, you're facing work authorization challenges. So in terms of having to face financial issues of having to finance your education, even with DACA now, a lot of the conversation and challenges around the new executive order by President Obama, which was really historical and really imperative, and only kind of a first step towards something that needs to be a bit more permanent and a bit more stable. Because at this stage, while young undocumented youth can work, they cannot get financial aid for their education. And so people are working and paying the taxes, however they can't actually reap the benefits of those specific taxes that they're paying for. So those small minor things are some of the challenges, and not even minor actually, major things, are part of the challenges and the downfalls of not having a really permanent structure around immigration reform.
So basically, you mentioned two important things. One has to do with jobs. Another thing has to do with education. And I can see the third one, which has to do with health. So my question is now, discussing these three issues, if we want to discuss these three issues, in terms of jobs, you know, what are the findings of your research for undocumented immigrants? Like, because I read that there is a lot of exploitation, like they're not well paid. Not only that, it's also like very hard to find jobs.
Yes.
And not only that, you know, they don't have working permits. So what are your findings, and what do you think that needs to be done?
So, I mean, outside of just my own personal experience of facing those same challenges, you have very bright, very ambitious young people who are facing this kind of invisible wall, which is, you know, documentation. And so you have people who are exploiting that. You have people who have to either work as nannies, you have people who have to work as busboys. And so when that employer sometimes has that knowledge of your standing legally, they are able to just pay you whatever they feel like paying you. There was someone that I engaged with who was being paid about $4 an hour and working about 12-hour shifts at a bakery. And it wasn't because of any lack of ambition or not being good enough, because now that he has DACA, this individual has, you know, skyrocketed and got his degree in engineering, and now is kind of leading a lot of the immigration movements and is a real leader in his community. And all he needed was just that stepping stone to really, you know, bloom.
Yeah, and then what about education? Are they able to enroll in schools?
So from what we've found so far, considering that it's a national study, so we have different states. So outside of New York, specifically more towards the southern part of the country, there's a whole nother ballpark of challenges that they're facing education-wise. There are certain states where they can't even enroll in a community college at all. And so you have this student with full potential, no financial access to their education, and then also just not being allowed to attend school. In New York, it's a bit different. You can attend a community college. CUNY is a magnificent structure of great schools here in New York. You're able to attend CUNY. You're not able to get financial assistance for that. You do have to try to tap into the very few scholarships that there are, and very, very few scholarships that there are for that undocumented youth would qualify for. But the challenges with education is that everyone that we've basically been engaging with, myself included, you have that balance of having to balance work and school. And sometimes having to choose school can be challenging because you need the work. So you can't go to school without making the money to go to school. So you find a lot of people have gaps in their education where they've had to take time off to work and save that money up so that they can then afford to pay for their next semester. And so it makes us a big delay within completing a 4-year degree can take up to 7 years for like the average immigrant that you have, young immigrant that you have here.
Yeah, so in terms of health services, how does it work for undocumented immigrants?
So again, it varies in different states, and New York is very progressive in a lot of aspects, I guess because of the condensed population of immigrants here. So in New York, you have your GMHC clinics, and so you can just go into those clinics and sign up on a sliding scale fee and be seen by a doctor for minor things, obviously checkups and things like that. But generally—
Do you know where these clinics and hospitals are?
So there are a few. So there's, I believe the same program is in Harlem Hospital. You have Gouverneur. We have quite a few here in New York. And outside of New York, though, in terms of that kind of access, it's a lot, you know, it's strict. It's a lot stricter, the laws. But on a total, we cannot just get, you know, health insurance the way an average American would be able to have that access, which so then provides the same obstacle in employment. You cannot get the same benefits that your colleague is getting, even if you're putting in the same amount of work, simply because you don't have that piece of paper that says you're authorized to work, even if you perhaps, like most undocumented youth, came as a child, not of your own free will, and so you're brought to this country, you're raised in this country, and then you don't have the full access that your peers have. And it's not because you're not equal, or even maybe you surpass them in terms of your qualifications, in terms of your intelligence, but it's basically just because, you know, the laws are not.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting research that you're part of, and Harvard is taking an initiative to do this research to understand issues surrounding the undocumented immigrants. So far, is this study done only in New York City, or is also conducted in other states?
Yeah, so I'm on the New York team, and there are various teams across the country. And so the team I'm with is actually led by New York Immigration Coalition, which is a really big, strong body and advocate here in New York City. But it's a national study from Arizona to California. Yes.
Yeah, so are they like planning to come up with a report or something like that? And where are they going to submit the results of their research?
So the research itself is basically just being put together to become one of obviously the most historical research on this group of migrants, as well as to push to affect policy, right? To affect policy, and to also kind of further educate organizations that do work with migrants around the real authentic needs of young migrants. Because it's one thing to kind of go off of stats, and it's a whole other thing to go off of these actual experiences and have that feedback more so. It's more so the interviews have been a lot of feedback from young migrants on what they've experienced and what they think, you know, needs to be done going forward.
Yeah, so we've touched a lot of issues here, but also we talked about your companies, the consultation companies, and then we talked about the Imbizo, which is the community organization in New York City. And now we talked about one of the researches that you're part of, which has to do with the undocumented immigrants. And I'm also aware that apart from these engagements, you also work to support the NALANA organization, which deals with the HIV/AIDS affected people. So can you also talk a little bit about that?
So NALANI, on that aspect of NALANI, I'm involved on more of a developmental associate level. It was founded by Mo Matatampela, who is a Lesotho-born gentleman, but it's also based here in New York. And so his brainchild is basically around the fact that although you have students who are attending school in Lesotho, the challenges that they face outside of school, when it's time to then have tutoring, homework help, prepping before a test, is where the downside, where you see kind of the lump-sidedness of the grades for students. And the population of students most affected with those challenges of studying outside of the school classroom, basically, is students that are either directly affected by HIV and AIDS or who have their families affected by the disease. And so either they're child-led homes, and so they don't really have that necessarily support when they're outside of the school system itself. And so his idea, which is I found was a brilliant idea when he came to me with it, and obviously something that was I couldn't say no in regards to helping in any way that I could. And so the idea is that they partner with various primary schools in Lesotho, and he's currently trying to expand, but they partner with different primary schools within Lesotho, and they take the students from there, and then they establish either taking up a few classrooms within the school, also have built different infrastructures kind of close to a number of different schools so the students can all come to that one specific center. And that's where they are met by young graduates, college graduates who are currently unemployed or who need job experience. And so they're tutored by these young graduates, the younger primary school students, and the graduates themselves are actually paid. So outside of job creation, it gives these graduates work experience and mentorship experience. And so it's a really community connected and linked solution to a challenge that's faced, I think, actually across the continent in regards to after school support, where the children are given a meal after school, and then they're given support, tutoring, and there are other activities involved within that program that they have with Nalani. And so it's one of those kinds of things when someone comes to you with it and you're like, that's a brilliant idea. And with Africans abroad, sometimes I feel we can have lots of debates and lots of brainstorming. And so for me, it's always thrilling to see an African who's making tangible change. And so for that, you can't say no in regards to any kind of collaboration or partnership and things like that.
Yeah, so are there any statistics that show the performances of these HIV-affected students in Lesotho?
So I can't speak on the entire country of Lesotho, and off the top of my head, I can't actually give you the stats. But for example, there are about over 3 million orphans in Southern Africa alone, well over. And so with that, coupled with the statistics that if a student doesn't do well in primary school, that kind of sets the tone for the rest of their academic career, basically. And so that's kind of the idea around why it's centered in primary school rather than high school. It's that if the child can get that core education solid and get that core foundation within their education, then that kind of sets the tone to put them in a position to succeed going further. And so I think that it's one of those really brilliant ideas that I think the continent needs more of.
So in terms of health, because I understand like in some countries, especially some Western countries, HIV AIDS is regarded as, at this particular time, like a treatable condition somehow. And in terms of treatment and the care of these HIV-affected students in Lesotho, do you think that there have been some progress made over the years?
Yes, I think that as you might know, Southern Africa is one of the best healthcare systems in the world, actually. And unfortunately, that was due to the reaction from facing the epidemic of HIV and AIDS. So that was a reactionary kind of tool that luckily, Southern Africa was able to rise to the occasion and really build a strong healthcare system around providing medication, around providing access to healthcare for anyone who's there, anyone who needs. And so now it's more so around supporting those initial initiatives made by government, and then as active citizens and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, is making sure that we kind of build those support systems around what the countries themselves have already done.
Yeah, so this is important that this organization is dealing with, giving some support to children who are affected with HIV/AIDS, and most of these children are orphans, having lost their parents, and sometimes they don't have anybody to, take care of them. So they get some support from an organization like this. And there are a lot of people in New York City who may be wanting to help the organization to continue with this mission and this work. So do you have, again, a website or some information that people will be able to use in order to get in touch with you or other people who are involved in this organization and in this great work?
Right. So the president and director again is Mo, and their oral website is Nalani, NALANE.org, and there's the full information on what they do, what was the initial kind of reason for starting the organization, and all the statistics and all the results are there, and the contact information for Mo himself, just on Nalani.org. They also have a Facebook page, Nalani at Facebook, and so you can just keep up with all the things that they're up to there. They actually just had a really outstanding partnership with Standard Bank Lesotho, where they gave them over 500,000 in regards to a sponsorship and a new collaboration. So if anyone else who wants to be a part of that can just check out their website.
Yeah, also I am aware of the South African community in Washington, D.C., and I've been to some of their activities, and what I realized is they also have the South African community partnering with what they call SADC, which is part of, like 14 countries in southern part of Africa. So they have, in Washington, D.C., they have that community that unites 14 countries together.
Right.
I'm not sure if I've had something similar in New York City.
In New York City, I haven't heard anything really similar as well. I know that in New York City, the challenge, even with South Africans, is digging each other up. It's very easy to tuck yourself away here in this city. And so while Imbizo's main focus is South Africa, we do encompass Southern African things within that, whether it be supporting a Southern African professional or business or an artist. But I am familiar with the SADC, like Southern African organization out in DC, and they do a lot of really great things. They're actually having...
and that's the one I was talking about.
Yes, and they're actually having
like fashion shows and
they have
things like that.
fashion shows, and they're actually having a reunion in August. The date escapes me, but I think it's August 28th or in the August 20s that Mbizo is going to go down to and support and encourage other people up here in New York to go down and support. They always have a really great, festival and a braai, aka a barbecue, and fashion show and cultural entertainment as well that they have down there. And so yeah, DC seems to be a lot more connected in regards to the SADC community as a whole.
What I would like to do right now is, because we are closing, I just want you to take a few minutes to just, remind people about what your companies are and why do you think that these people should get interested in these activities that you're doing, and as well as just, to wind up by making them remember you and your organizations.
So I guess as a sound off, what I can just say is that I believe that if sometimes for some of us we want to be a part of some kind of change, we want to be a part of something that's a social impact initiative of some kind, and we don't know where to start ourselves, but I think that also supporting other people who are already engaged in those kind of progressive activities is doing your part in itself. And so part of what I like to tell people in regards to, you know, people like to reflect on Madiba, Nelson Mandela, as you mentioned earlier, but a part of that is that he himself said he was not a god. You know, he was just a person who was met with a challenge and was able to face that challenge. And so for us, I feel that, you know, anyone can do a Madiba kind of thing. So rather using Madiba as a verb in regards to, you know, whether you're starting an education project, you know, you're being a Madiba, you know, you're taking on a Madiba. Whether you are supporting someone else who's thought of a really brilliant idea and all they're asking you to do is like their page or to, you know, donate $10 or come to their event, that's also, you know, being a Madiba. And so I think that for me, I would just like to say that, you know, do what you can where you are. Your circumstances will always kind of be there, but to find that way to overcome them and to kind of really dig deep inside yourself and find what drives you, you know, what pushes you, what motivates you, and to have that be your engine towards accomplishing what you know, your God-given talents or what you think is a problem. And if you can think of a solution to kind of, you know, make sure that you're taking that on and supporting. I mean, it doesn't have to be my organizations. I know this is supposed to be about me, but it doesn't even have to be anything that I'm involved in, but anything that you feel, if you're not South African, if you're from Nigeria, if you're from Kenya, support people that are trying their best to be the change they want to see in the world. So you have the change makers, and then but they also need that support. And so just supporting those people who are doing great things in your community and encourage them, because sometimes you do have your doubts, you know, as an ambitious young person, but when you get those words of encouragement, it really goes a long way. So I would just say that, you know, encourage young people to do the best that they can. If someone has an idea and you're not too sure of it yet, ask them, engage with them, and, you know, just provide, you know, that support and just encourage, you know, young change makers.
All right, so that said, I would like to thank Yoliswa Cele for coming today to the studio. We heard a lot about your organizations and about South Africa and what you're doing, including the research for undocumented immigrants, which is part of the Harvard initiative to understand the issues surrounding the undocumented immigrants in the U.S. And I would like, you know, to thank you for coming to the studio. It's been a pleasure, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure is mine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.